Hi everyone, and welcome to Wins and Losses, the show where wins are celebrated and losses are lessons. I'm your host, Renee Seiler, and I wanted to do this show because in the entrepreneurial space, everybody always talks about the good and the successes, but people don't really want to dive into the losses so much. So we're going to look at both of those things. And to that end, I have invited a couple of gentlemen, very tall gentlemen, by the way, to my quote-unquote living room. Idris Talib and Kito J. Johnson. Both of these men might look familiar to you because Kito is, of course, the host of Property Power Play, and Idris was a guest on the show, right?
Right, yes.
Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's start by just sort of talking a little bit about your business. Kito, tell me about your business.
Sure. So I'm a real estate broker and investor. I have a vertically integrated company called the B&S Companies, and so we do everything from helping buyers and sellers of commercial and residential property. We equip individuals on investing protocols and best practices. We also manage rental property and have a portfolio of my own.
Oh, wow. How long have you been doing that?
Oh, more than I want to admit. 27, it'll be 27 years in about a month. I acquired my first property when I was 20 years old.
I was just going to say, how could it be 27 years old when you're barely 27?
I received it. Thank you.
All right. And Idris, tell us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so my business is, I'm in the same business as Kito. It's in real estate. So I'm a real estate investor. So my particular niche is I do high-end properties, known as the pretty house guy, with a unique twist. So I utilize creative financing in terms of my acquisition strategy. And then right now I'm really delving into shared living investing as well.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing real estate for 21 years.
Okay, so. And again, barely 21. Okay, yeah, awesome. You guys know each other, though,
yes,
right?
Yes,
not just from Property Power Play, but tell me a little bit about your background with each other.
Well, I'll say, I've known of Idris for years, and I always acknowledged and appreciated his brand, the Pretty House Guy, because when I started, I wasn't dealing with pretty houses, right? I was going in and getting my hands dirty and buying ugly properties and renovating them and all of that jazz, right? But when I came across Idris, I realized an investment doesn't have to start as an ugly property. You can actually purchase pretty houses. And so that's how I first learned of Idris, through his brand. And I followed him, I feel like, from a distance and kind of appreciated his work from a distance. But we just met really officially a couple of years ago.
Right.
Did you know Kito was following you, or had you reached out?
No, so actually I was following Kito as well. It was probably either Facebook or Instagram, and then Kito had these events that some of the top investors around Atlanta would come to every single month. The only issue for me was, your office was in Roswell, right? Yeah, it was in Roswell. I live way out in Dallas, Georgia, way out in Paulding County. So, oh man, it's dry. So actually, we were talking about this. I went to a concert. I don't remember who it was. It was probably about 6 years ago at Phillips Arena, and we ran into each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I did, we'll probably get into my story. So we didn't officially meet until Clubhouse. So, during the pandemic, a lot of people listen to Clubhouse, and then we connected at Atlantic Station, as a matter of fact. We went out for lunch, and then, ever since, Kito's just been just a wonderful center of influence in the real estate investing community. And one of the things that I always tell Kito, and this is serious, that I've never heard one negative statement about Kito one day in my life. And one of the things I always say is, if you're going to be great, expect the hate. There's no hate towards Kito.
Wow.
His business acumen is top notch. His reputation is top notch. His brand is top notch. And that's why, I love just the association that I have with Kito, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
I love that. Well, then Kito is an example that you can be great without the hate.
Right.
You got to change that up.
Exactly.
You can thank Kito for that.
Right.
What have been some really big wins for you guys? You can start, Idris. Tell us, what have been some big wins in your career?
So my career, it actually wasn't even real estate related. I used to run a medical practice and mental health agency I had offices in Raleigh, Charlotte, Greenville, Columbia, Williamston, Atlanta, as well as Marietta.
Wow.
It was a multi-million-dollar business. I had about 300 employees, psychiatrists, physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, nurses, paraprofessionals, therapists. We ran the gamut. And, at my peak, we were probably doing between $60,000 to $100,000 every single week.
How much?
$60,000 to $100,000 a week.
Right.
So, it was, that was great for me. I felt like I was on Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And, when you feel like you're up here, you got to watch your back because things happen. But
Wait, how old were you when that was?
Let's see. I was 38 years old.
Okay. So you thought, all right, I'm rocking and rolling.
Right.
Things are good. All right. And then I know some stuff happened, and we're going to get to that in just a second.
Right.
Kito, what about you? What have been some big wins for you?
I was blessed to be able to find my passion really early, right? And I acquired my first property when I was 20. And so by 23, I was doing real estate full time. And throughout that process, I purchased a lot of property. I've sold a lot of property. I think one of the greatest wins for me, in addition to finding financial freedom, is assisting other people in finding financial freedom. And one of my mentees just a few years ago wrote a book called Retired at 25. And in that book, he acknowledges the influence that I had on his life and the process that he walked through to be able to acquire property that paid him and allowed him to, quote unquote, retire so that now he can really follow his passion and do the things that he really wants to do.
What's that feel like when someone points to you and says, hey, thank you for your contribution to my success?
It's amazing, right? Because knowing that I'm walking in my passion and my purpose that God placed me here on earth for, to be able to see other people win, that really is the greatest win for me.
And to have found your passion so early, how is it that you were able to do that?
That's a great question. It has a lot to do with my mother and father. My dad is an entrepreneur and has always been. And he's one of the biggest risk takers that I've ever known. And my mom, not so much, right? So that was the balance in the household growing up. But to see my mom's work ethic and her willingness to go push a clock at the Postal Service for 30 years or so, and then my dad just, as one would say, willy-nilly, just jumps in head first at anything because he's willing to take a risk. And I feel like I have a balance of that.
Okay.
And so that really is the foundation for me.
Idris, do you consider yourself a risk taker? I mean, I feel like that question is like it's a foregone conclusion because you have to be, right, to be an entrepreneur?
It's interesting. I am a risk taker, however, they're calculated risk.
Okay.
So what I do to lower my risk is I do things very creatively. Every single thing I've done has been, creative. For example, I've done hundreds and hundreds of real estate transactions. I've never had to go to a bank for a loan. Never had my credit pulled. And almost every single transaction, I've never even used any of my money whatsoever. When I started my medical practice, it was a total accident. I was a stockbroker on Wall Street, and one of my clients, I got the idea from him, and then I just ran with it. Wow. My mother was a licensed clinical social worker, so she was a therapist. And I started the business, and then we just continued to grow. I accidentally started my medical practice. I needed a doctor to provide oversight on master's level clinicians. That's what started my medical practice. And then I'm good with numbers. Like I said, I have a background in engineering. So I just reverse engineer things and just figure out creatively, how can I create a substantial gain for myself while being able to lower my level of risk.
Wow. We were talking off camera and you were talking about being an engineer, and I said, oh, well, you're not really using your engineering, but you use it every day.
Absolutely.
I love that. So we talk a little bit about the losses too. And Kito, your story is kind of interesting, and just about your father, having watched him get fleeced out of $140,000.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And what impact did that have on you in terms of your entrepreneurial journey?
It had a great impact. I think I was around 13 at the time, and him being the risk taker that he is, there were a lot of ups and downs. And, I say this to say, there's nothing against him, but my dad did not always do the greatest job of learning from mistakes or challenges, and he kind of repeated them. And so in a lot of ways, and I appreciate my dad for this, in a lot of ways I learned what not to do, right? And I remember after the ups and downs in our, in our upbringing, we were finally at a place where, we felt financially good, right? We had just gotten a new car, and I'm 12, 13 at the time, and things are great for the first time in a while. And one day after school, I'm sitting on the couch, and my dad comes in tears. Dad was wrong, and it was a Monday morning. He had shown up at his office that Monday morning, and over the weekend, his partner had cleared out the office, moved all the furniture out. He checked the bank account, and it was $140,000 gone. And I had to grow up really fast in that moment. And so from 13, 14, 15, I found myself running the office side of my dad's business. And I watched him pull himself out of a major crunch, right? And when it was all said and done, and I really, really value my father for this, when it was all said and done, he fulfilled every contract. He did everything that he had promised to his clients, and it was not easy for him at all. But I certainly learned from that, and I learned how to run an office. I learned how to manage people. I learned how to hire and fire, and that was my 13, 14, 15 up until graduated high school at 17.
So you were still going to school, running the office,
Yes.
doing all the stuff as a 13-year-old and up to 18.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and so at that time there was what they called the work exit program. So in my junior and senior year of high school, I left midday, and I got credit for working in the afternoons. And so that was my junior and senior year of high school.
Did you ever feel like life was unfair at that moment? Did your dad express those kinds of things? Like, why me?
For sure. I definitely felt that and sensed that from my dad's perspective. Because like I said, he had a lot of ups and downs over the years. And it's a whole nother story with, my mom deciding to go back to work and the life lessons that I learned at very early ages. But he definitely felt like that. Why me? But at the end of the day, he always got back up, right? He always dusted himself off. And he was always, and I appreciate what you said about me earlier, but my dad has always been a man of integrity, right? And he always fulfilled his obligations regardless of what he had to sacrifice in the process.
Wow. That's incredible, Kito. Wow. Idris, I know you have a bit of a backstory as well.
Right.
So fill us in on that.
Okay. I actually remember the date like it was yesterday. February 18th, 2018. Whole world just changed. Told you earlier I was on top of Mount Everest. Imagine going straight to hell. That's what happened. That's how steep the transition was. So basically around that time, I was at the peak of my medical practice. I was in this beautiful condo. I could see the whole city of Atlanta. It was just, everything was perfect for me. And then at 2:00 that morning, I heard these loud knocks, boom, 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 boom. Fulton County Sheriff opened up. 3 large sheriff pointing guns at me. And I put my hands out. I was like, what's this all about? They handcuffed me and they said, there's 2 warrants for your arrest out of South Carolina. One is a false statement by a medical provider. The second is obtaining property under false pretenses. So I had no idea what this was about. So they transport me to Fulton County. I stayed there for 7 days and then I get extradited to Greenville, South Carolina, to where I go up for my bond hearing. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, this is no big thing. I'm just gonna pay some money, I'm gonna be out. That didn't happen. So the Attorney General showed up, set bond at $250,000, and right there, just my heart sank right into my stomach. I'm thinking, what's going on? How could this happen? And I secure an attorney, do the investigation and provide all the evidence. And basically we had some clinicians were putting in documentation without seeing the clients, and we're billing on them. So we did receive funds for clients that were not being seen. Therefore, I couldn't fight the case.
Wow. Okay, so let me go back. When you were being held in Fulton County Jail, did you know or have any idea what this was about? Did they explain it in the charge or any of that?
No.
So for 7 days you were in the dark.
Right. Everything was in limbo. I didn't know anything until I got extradited to South Carolina and I was able to secure an attorney.
And that was the first time then the charges were made, you were made aware of the charges?
Yeah, well, I knew what the charges were, but I didn't know what they derived from.
Okay. And so how did that happen? Did you have people in the office who were doing bad things and you just were not aware of it?
So this what I'll say is my blind spot. And this is something that I really learned from. Is typically you'll have somebody who's providing documentation oversight, especially for a practice that was growing as fast as mine. I focus on revenue, making money, getting sales, getting contracts. I had contracts all over these 3 states. I was growing like crazy at a rapid pace. I was hiring people like crazy. And then it just created a huge opportunity to where something like this can't happen. And obviously it did happen.
So I'm so sorry to keep hammering this home, but I just want to make sure I understand this. But so were there people that you had hired who had bad intentions?
I don't know if they were initially bad intentions. However, things did happen as a result. And then we were growing so large, I wasn't actually directly hiring people anymore. I had a management infrastructure in place in which they were hiring people. So maybe that was something. At the end of the day, I am responsible for everything because I'm the owner of the company. Perhaps I didn't have a system of controls to ensure something like that would not happen.
Right. So that was the big thing you got out of this, was that you were growing so fast you didn't have enough time to put the proper kind of oversight into it and know what was going on? Is that?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that, yes.
Wow. Kito, you also had some difficult times. I know you lost your wife. What was going on? Tell me a little bit about that and how that impacted you and your business.
Greatly. In addition to, I would say at this point in my life, I had acquired 17 rental properties. And like Idris, I felt like at that point I was on top of the world. My wife and I had just had our second child. We have a son named Emmanuel, a daughter named Imani, and Imani she was just born, right? And so in addition to that, we were also pastoring a ministry that my wife and I had started together. So we were pastors and, running real estate business on the side by this point, and doing what we felt our additional calling was to impact the community, right? So we were pastoring the church and my wife got sick. Her complications initially came during the pregnancy of our daughter. And by the time our daughter was born, she was in and out of the hospital. So I got this church that we're running, I got these rental properties that we're managing, got a newborn baby, and we're in the hospital 3-4 days out of every week, and I remember like it was yesterday, there were times, we check in the hospital and 13 days later, we're just checking out. And a lot of complications that for the longest, they just really didn't know what was going on. To make a long story short, when it was all said and done, she had developed some kidney failure. And because we had been in the hospital so much for the next year and a half almost, when we'd go, it was just like, this is another time we're gonna check in and check out. And we checked in early that morning, and they ran tests for hours. And they said, well, we're not really sure. I mean, we've heard this all before. So this time we're gonna go up, take her upstairs and check her in a different unit and run some tests on her lungs. And, Mr. Johnson, wait out here. Once we get her connected, we'll come back and we'll bring you back. Been through it all before. But this time was different. They took her to the back and they came back out 20 minutes later and said, we don't know what happened, but while we were connecting her, she took a major turn for the worse, and it does not look good. Chaplain comes in the room. And so I'm sitting there not really knowing what's going on at this point. And they came back out another 15 minutes later and said, Mr. Johnson, we're sorry. We lost her. And obviously that hit me like a ton of bricks. And the first thought that came to mind was, what am I going to tell my kids? Right? Because on the way to the hospital, we dropped them off at school. Like, we go to the hospital all the time, right? And so that was definitely a major turning point also in my life. And, just that whole process of rebuilding, et cetera. But
how old were your kids at that time?
My daughter was not quite 2 yet.
Wow.
And my son at that point was 6.
And how did you handle that? How did you continue to care for the kids?
Yeah.
How did you care for the pastoral community?
Yeah.
How did you manage your business? And how did you care for yourself?
Yeah, so looking back on it, I was an autopilot. One thing for certain, in the community, the church community, I had a lot of support, and it certainly helps that all of my family is from here. So, my sister stepped up to the plate, my mom stepped up to the plate, and it was weird. I remember the day of my wife's funeral, someone came up to me afterwards and said, "So who's gonna take your kids?"
What?
And I'm thinking, I'm gonna keep my kids, right? And like I said, I had a lot of support from family and friends, but it never crossed my mind that my kid's gonna go live with someone else, right? And so it was just us for a long period of time, and as a result, we rebuilt our life, right? And the other side to all of this is, while all of this is going on, the market crashed. And so I had 17 properties, and that 17 turned to 15. And then I woke up another day, and that 15 was 12. And I woke up a week or so later, one by one, we began to lose every property that we had. And when it was all said and done, from 17 properties, I maintained 2. And we lost everything. And the 2 that I kept, that we were blessed to keep, was our personal primary residence and the property that my grandfather gave me, that my father grew up in, and the one that I refused to lose. It's just so many lessons throughout all of that. But at the end of the day, what I discovered is, and this is just my perspective, but while you can't always trace the hand of God, you have to learn how to trust the hand of God. And looking back, I see God's blessing in all of it. And it'll take another show for us to talk about the ways that I felt like my wife even prepared us for her passing, and just so many things. You hear people say, they knew it was coming. And you hear people say that, and you're like, really? But looking back, I just see so many things that she did, and whether she knew it was coming or not, it was definitely God using her and equipping and growing all of us at the same time. And so now, all of those challenges, the tragedy, has turned into a major testimony, and we've been a blessing to so many people as a result of it.
The market crashing, was that around 2008, 2009?
Yes.
Okay, so the market crashes, you've got this young family,
Yes.
You're trying to keep it all together, whatever. Did you ever think about quitting or just giving up?
I don't know if quitting is the right word, but I definitely took a step back and reprioritized. And what I've discovered now, some years later, looking back, every major shift in my life, every promotion in my business, every time there was what now feels like a tsunami of increase, has always come as a result of me seemingly hitting a brick wall. And anytime, and to be honest, I'm in one of those shifts now. When I wake up and I look around me, and there are unexplainable things that just really don't make natural sense, but yet they're happening. Now I've come to understand that that's God's way of saying, at least for me, that you're about to make a transition, that there's a shift coming. So I've learned how to look through a different lens, and as opposed to saying, why me? To ask myself now the question, or ask God the question, what is the shift? What are you moving me into now? What's the next biggest thing or greatest thing that you have for me? And that's just been the pattern of my life. He increases me when I stop and look back and say, okay, I'm good with this. I don't understand it, but I'm good with this. I trust you.
Interesting. Idris, tell me how that story, that chapter, because that really is just a chapter in your life about when you got extradited and ended up in the legal, the jaws of the legal system, as it were. Tell me how that ended.
Oh, it ended. I went to prison.
And there you go.
We worked out a plea bargain with the Attorney General. I had to pay back $400,000 in 6 months, but I had to shut down my business. Wow. And then I had some savings, but with all the legal fees, I had all this property. I lost everything. I couldn't. We go in the day of sentencing. It was November 6, 2018. I had no idea what I was facing. The night before, like Kito, I had 2 small children as well. I had no idea when I was going to see them again. So I go in for sentencing, and my attorney as well as myself, we're talking about all the great things that I've done, throughout my time. And then he said, "You have anything else to say?" I said, "No, sir." He said, 5 years, boom, hit the gavel. And then I felt handcuffs on back of my wrist. And, I'm a math guy. I started doing the math of when I'm going to get out. And I was like, wow, I was going to have to do 65% of my time. So 65% of 5 years, do a little over 3 years. But fortunately, there's some different things that happen. I ended up getting out and doing 40% of the time. So I ended up doing 2 years out of that 5. But I will say that was, kind of what Kito was alluding to. That was an inflection point in my life. Mm-hmm. Before then, I was almost carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Mm-hmm. But then I was able to get rid of everything. It was just me. I had a time period to where I could just really just focus, on myself. It's interesting. We're talking about, spiritual things. The first class I went to in prison, it was 2 pastors. And I told them my story. And they said, "You know what, young man? God loved you so much, he sent you to prison." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. I'm thinking he's just doing church talk and everything. Mm-hmm. But as my time was there, my path was revealed. Mm-hmm. While I was there in South Carolina, fortunately for me, I'm academically gifted. We broke the record for the number of guys getting their GED when I was in prison. When I was there, I was doing real estate in prison. I was doing credit repair when I was in prison. I was actually balancing the 403B plans and reallocating the correctional officers' portfolios. I had an expense account when I was in prison. I was able to teach when I was in prison. So I was able to do a lot of the things. But the biggest lesson that I took from it all was, once everything is taken from you, it's kind of who do you have to become to be able to transition yourself to that next phase in your life? Mm-hmm. And that's what I was faced with, upon leaving.
So prison, I guess you called it an inflection point. So you were tabula rasa after that. You were able to just clean slate it, and it gave you a new reset point.
Exactly.
And then you were able to go forward from
Correct.
that. Did you ever feel like, why me, or any of that? Did any of that go through your mind?
It did. However, I didn't let it. I always think of the positive out of everything. To me, it was just a test. I used to always tell people, you could take everything away from me and I'll build it back. And God has a funny sense of humor, because he definitely took everything away from me. He said, okay, let me see how bad you are. Wow. And that's the way that I attacked it. When I came out, I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. I was very intentional in terms of what I would do. Every single day, I spent my days being very intentional. To me, I just I put myself in the mind frame. I said, you know what? It's like me going back to school. And then for me, I said, you know what? As a matter of fact, God did want me to come to prison. And I just changed my mindset around everything. I said, as a matter of fact, you know what? I came to prison so people could work for me. People were doing my laundry for me. People were cleaning up for me. When I go into just my mindset, go into the cafeteria, I had people preparing my meals for me. As a matter of fact, these correctional officers are here working for me to provide protection for me. So I could be the best that I could be when I get out here and I can go out and set the world on fire. That was my mentality.
Wow. Would you be where you are now had you not experienced that?
No. Because of Lamar Tyler, one of the things that he always talks about is fracture focus. I had fracture focus. I was here, there, everywhere. If it made money, I was chasing it and everything. But now, as a result of that, I'm able to really just hone in and focus and be very intentional in terms of how I live my life. And that's such a blessing.
Wow. How did you get to TSP? And what has TSP meant to you?
I got to TSP through another individual who was hosting a webinar. And he was teaching people how to start webinars, and Lamar was his guest on the webinar. And at that time, I had done a lot of coaching in real estate, and I said, well, I want to, market my services in a different way and do more mentoring on another level. And so I was there to learn about webinars, and then when the webinar was over and they, did the sales pitch, I DM'd the host and Lamar, and the host didn't respond, and Lamar did. Long story short, I hired TSP at the time. They were doing done for you services, and they helped me create my first course and showed me how to market it. And they over-delivered in such a way throughout that process that I had heard that there's something called TSP Live coming in June. I think I hired him in like February. And so throughout that process, and Lamar being the person that he is, he said, well, if you let us do your webinar, we'll give you a free ticket to TSP Live.
That sounds just like Lamar too, doesn't it?
I showed up at TSP Live, and again, because they over-delivered so much, I didn't know what was going to be sold or offered, but I knew I was in. I didn't know how much it was going to cost, but I knew I was in because of the way they had handled me and as a client leading up to that moment, right? And so, I received tremendous value through that particular live, joined and became a mastermind member, and I say I've been a part of the family ever since. I appreciate so much Lamar and Ronnie and the community that they've created. And every time I show up, it's like it's a family reunion, and we look forward to coming back and being with our family. And I say this all the time of Ronnie and Lamar. They are some of the most genuine people that I've ever met in my entire life. They're some of the most loyal people that I've ever met in my life. And when you become a part of the family, whether you're at the live or on the other side of the country or the world talking about the live, once you become a part of the family, you're always a part of the family. And I've always felt like that.
I love it. And Idris, what about you? What's TSP meant for you?
It's interesting because coming out of prison, I lost everything. And I knew about Lamar and Ronnie when they were doing Black Married with Children. And then I saw the transition into TSP. So obviously, I couldn't afford to come to the conference, but I was a volunteer. So I was a volunteer. That was, I think it was the last year. It was probably 2021. It was at the Westin in Buckhead. And then that just gave me my first experience of TSP Live. And I said, I committed to myself. I said, I will join Mastermind. I told myself I will join. I couldn't afford it at the time, but I said I will join Mastermind. And then I just put myself into a position. As a matter of fact, I thought it was game plan. I thought I had to come to game plan to join Mastermind because I was ready. And I talked to a couple of individuals, just getting their feedback on it. And then I know Kito's been a part of it. And then it's actually Jeff Moore. He said, you don't gotta wait. You can join right now if you're ready. So he emailed somebody. I put down my deposit. I've been in it, maybe 6 months, and then you know I've 10x my investment already. You know, generated over 6 figures in 6 months. So, you know, that was a thing. You know, I'm ready to join collaborative though. So that's my next milestone. But you know, kind of what Kito said to me. I mean, it's just been in the atmosphere of people who look just like us. Mm-hmm. But the thing about it is, you're with the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I love so much about it. You're not here to get quick fixes to make some quick money. You know, I hear other people, all you need is 700 credit score in the LLC, you'll be rich. You know, it doesn't work that way. You know, here you're learning solid business principles, but it's a family reunion. I feel like I'm coming to like a HBCU homecoming meets, you know, a round table circle of CEOs. And like Kito said, we're all family. You know, and the thing that I love most about what Lamar and Ronnie have done is everyone you need is right there in the room.
Yeah.
Everyone you need is right there in the room. And I'm just, it's just something that it's always gonna be a part of my life.
Yeah.
You guys, wow. I love it. I love our chat. Thank you so much for being really open and honest. And I know that someone's going to watch this and get a whole lot out of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And blessings and good luck for the rest of the year.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wins and Losses. We'll see you next time.